What's up, everyone? Welcome to The Plot Strikes Back. Nick here to talk about Yellowstone Season 5, Episode 11, titled 353. There will be spoilers ahead if you haven't watched this episode yet, but if you have, we'll just roll right into it. But before we do, if you're new here and you want to help support the channel, which I really do appreciate, go ahead and hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and the bell for more notifications when I release new content. Of the 5 episodes that we're getting here in this final part of Season 5 in the series itself, so far through 3 episodes, this was the best, and this was a longer episode, which was quite nice because we got a lot of information in this episode. This episode dives into the escalating fallout from John Dutton's death, which Beth and Kayce suspect to be a murder staged rather than being a suicide as was initially reported. Through their investigation, Kayce is obviously enlisting help from his former Navy SEALs to uncover the truth. While Jamie is increasingly embroiled with market equities, he suspects that there might be a fallout with his alliances. And I thought this episode did a great job with, blending the drama, the family turmoil, the political intrigue, and of course, setting the stages for the final 2 episodes. Even though this episode starts off in the past, as we've seen in the previous 2 episodes, we're finally getting the connection from the past leading up to the present day. The episode opens up with emotional beats from Rip and Beth, which reflects the strain of their relationship and the separation. And Beth even states she can't do this for an entire year, and that's hard enough for anyone to be away from the person that they love for an extended period of time. We see it a lot when we have our troops that go overseas, or jobs that request a lot of time from them being away from home in any sort of circumstance. Meanwhile, Kayce is with Monica and Tate, and they're gathering all the furniture and appliances, kitchenware, and paintings, and so their home is really now feeling like a home. It's becoming their own now. There's one interesting part, though, about a crooked picture frame, which was indeed crooked. I have to admit that as a guy, Kayce did turn it a little crooked, and then it was fixed by Monica, which I thought was kind of interesting. And not that I read it as a sign of tension between them, because it's just something that, couples do. If you're in a relationship, you know exactly what I refer to. And it's just something that I was like, where's the measure, or even phones nowadays have something where you can, make sure that the angle is exactly right. What I took that as is something that might be within Kayce itself. Maybe there's just something about him that isn't quite well adjusted. It's not sitting dead in the center yet. It's not centered itself because of what is happening in the present day. The plot in this particular episode really intensifies as Beth is driving home late at night. Even though Rip said, no, you should stay, and she says, no, I'll just pop 2 Adderall and drive straight through and be home by sunrise. And she does just that. She's learning how to speak Italian and find the best way to a man's heart is through his stomach with food. And obviously that is one of the best ways, being an Italian man myself. And it's just something that was kind of a funner side of Beth to learn. And we obviously know that she is human and she has those parts of her. But it's what happens at night as she feels something. It's this weird, unexplainable foreboding experience that I know people do have, and you can sense that something was wrong. And it wasn't just with her, but it was also with her sibling, with Kayce, as he can't sleep, and Monica wakes up and asks if he's okay, but he's not. It wasn't just a bad nightmare or a bad dream. He's literally sweating in bed. And then moments later, the phone calls, and it's HPD. I knew this wasn't a dream, and it's a terrible reality. What we see is 3 masked men with the night vision as they're going into the governor's mansion, and they find him in bed, and they subdue him, and then inject him with an unknown substance to keep him from waking up, even though they, as we find later, they temporarily put him to sleep just enough so that they could inject him and then in turn drag him to the bathroom and then stage like a suicide attempt. They hold him there. They put the gun to his head. They use his own hand and fire the trigger at that point. And we see that later in the autopsy room with the medical examiner. One of the reasons why I enjoy this episode is because it had a lot to do with Kayce. Kayce was more involved, which we didn't really see a lot of in the previous episode. But this time, as a phone call between him and Beth unfolds, he needs to go see Jamie himself. And Beth is being a little selfish, in my opinion, because she wants to deal with him. But Kayce has every right to look at Jamie in his own eyes and see the truth and be able to tell if Jamie is lying or not. But before he gets to that point, he makes a stop at the coroner's location and speaks with the medical examiner. And I love just how boss Kayce was in this part, because he's like, no, I'm going to go in here and get stuff done because this is my father. And there's a question is like, I'm just questioning why he's dead, not how he died or whatnot, even though the how is important. But it's like, why am I burying my father? I shouldn't be doing this. No one should be doing this right now. But yet we are. There needs to be answers. And even though the medical examiner herself just kind of seems a little standoffish, like she doesn't think that, oh, you're the livestock commissioner, you don't have the authority here. And he's like, but I do, actually. So, just kind of, flops it on the table and was like, no, I do have authority here. Sorry. Another part of Kayce in this episode was that he didn't have time to wait. And I respect that for the sake of the writing in the show, because we're in the last 3 episodes. So to draw it out any further would have just been a waste of time. And I think would have, hurt the pace of this episode and the remainder of the show at that point. So he calls the detective, I believe, 2 times and says, and the medical examiner says, wow, you really don't like to wait, do you? And it's like, I wouldn't either, honey. So let's get this show on the road. We're going to go look at my father right now, which I found it interesting because in every scene that involved the body of John Dutton, we actually never see Kevin Costner's face. I don't know. I would have liked to have seen that. I understand they tried to distance him with the show at this point, which I think is still kind of dumb, but that's just my take. One of the things that Kayce does as well is to request the toxicology report, which wasn't done prior to that point, which is a little weird. And I get it, as she states, there was no reason to request that, but there again, this isn't a big deal for her, and even though it should be, because as Kayce states, this is the governor after all, not just some random person. I thought Kayce showed good investigation skills here. He used some logical reasoning skills with some of the questions that went back and forth between him and the medical examiner, and then given her answers, made Kayce think about a couple things. And then once we see the marks on the back of Dutton's legs, we can see that there are imprints, which further questions Kayce about, hey, what kind of snags would you do in Afghanistan when you were going in and taking people hostage? And it was kind of funny to see him request the help of the aide and then puts the aide to sleep in a matter of seconds. And then he wakes up and it says WTF. I was laughing at that point, sorry to say, but it just goes to show you an example of what exactly happens when you clog the carotid artery in the person's neck. And then how would you do it, if they were sleeping? Well, you would just, be pin them down and carry them that way. We saw when the 3 men entered the governor's mansion and used exactly the method that Kayce was referring to. So I wonder if Kayce actually knows who those people are, or if the original person he reached out to that he calls on the phone in the previous episode might know who they are. In the political arena, we can see that the newly appointed governor is in John Dutton's old office with Clara, his former secretary, who takes a promotion on the spot, along with Senator Perry and the AG Jamie. They're talking about the instances about taxes, about the lease that John Dutton had in place prior to this point, eminent domain. What about market equities? And even though Jamie's trying to use his Weasley ways to do the deal that he has with market equities, Senator Perry is quick to offer pushback. And at one point, as she leaves, she reminds both the governor and Jamie that John Dutton had a vision. What John Dutton had in place with the land and the airport construction and so forth, it was about trying to protect the land around the ranch and not having Costco's and congested traffic all around it instead. And after Senator Perry leaves, Clara stands up and says, I can't do this. And she walks out and she runs after Senator Perry looking for a job. And even though Senator Perry says, I think I can find you something, the one thing she says to Clara, which is quite interesting, is that she's no longer bound by confidentiality because she's technically unemployed, if you catch her drift. And i.e. what that means is just, hey, go ahead and inform Kayce and Beth about what's taking place here. And I presume that's going to come up in the next episode. It was finally good to see Chief Rainwater make his appearance as well. And gives his sympathies and condolences, his deepest condolences to both Kayce and Beth. And I thought it was a pretty good conversation between both him and Beth about, being realists, about the land, about what to do, and about not only John Dutton's family's dreams, having been there for over 140 years, but also Chief Rainwater's dreams about his grandfather, great-grandfather, his people also being on that same land, of course, as we all know. And there's a lot of, could've, would've, should've's between their conversation, and realizing that there's nothing that could be done about preserving the land. It's only prolonging the collapse of it, which is actually really quite sad, because we can see that happen a lot in our own lifetime, even in the present day. And then after, of course, Kayce leaves the coroner's office waiting for the toxicology report to come back, which I presume we'll also get next episode, in the penultimate episode, he makes a stop by Jamie's office and says to Kate, "Where is he?" And then picks up Kate from her desk, walks her into Jamie's office forcibly, sits her down because he doesn't want her calling the police on site, and then proceeds to throw Jamie across his desk and is about to beat his ass. But Jamie stops him, as Jamie is a bit of a weasel. He says, "I would never do that. I would never do that to our father. I would never do that to you. I could never do that." He's lying to Jamie's face because he knows the truth, because he said it to Sarah Atwood. And even though he has a lot of regrets, as we saw in the 9th episode, the fact that he can just lie, and I understand why he's doing it, of course, because he doesn't want to just, get butchered right there on the spot. And of course, it wouldn't look good for Kayce either. But as Kayce even says, I hope you're telling the truth for both your sake and mine, because I feel like at that point, Kayce was realizing that his rage would go out of control, and Kayce might regret what he's about to do and just literally kind of beat him to a pulp. Of course, go to jail, but then Jamie might be dead at that point as well, or maybe close to death. Perhaps he decides to let Jamie go. Was that a wise decision? Well, in some ways, maybe, because I didn't think that Kayce would be the one to kill Jamie. Period. I definitely think it's going to be Beth. As the investigation is now open again and deemed as a homicide, the mysterious figure that we see confront Sarah Atwood in the previous episode in the investigation room that they're in, or interrogation room, he catches wind of the news and says, "Are you seeing this?" And then it's a very short scene, of course. But then we see Sarah Atwood with some other figures of the Markwood Equities team. They're talking plans and, timelines and so forth. And then she catches the news at the bar and takes a look and starts to panic. Her panic leads to going to a remote cell phone store, buying a burner phone, which she says it's not a burner phone. She makes some lie up about, her kid and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we all know the truth, of course, as we're watching it. Sarah, sorry. She gets her minutes, goes home, tries to call a number on a little card, which is no longer in service. Ruh-roh. And of course, by that point, she breaks the phone and Jamie just shows up magically there, which I wonder if he was just chilling upstairs and then heard her and then came downstairs or was in a different room, whatever. And they get into a little argument, and, Sarah's trying to be her sly way with, "Oh, don't worry, there's nothing that ties you. I did all the work. I took all the risk. I took all the sacrifice." And yes, she did, actually, as we find out moments later. And there's a bit of a slapping contest between the two of them. And I just hate how soft Jamie is, really. I, for a second there, thought that Jamie was going to kill Sarah with that hammer just sitting on the counter. But there again, I was like, no, Jamie doesn't have the balls to do that either. And then as Sarah gets into her car and drives away, soft-ass Jamie comes along and, gives her a call. And she says, well, that didn't take long. And she's sitting at a stop sign. And then we see a car just randomly stroll up to the side of her, say, "Hey, can you roll your window down?" Like, how dumb could you possibly be, Sarah Atwood, for someone who moments beforehand says, "Come on, Jamie, think like an attorney. Use your logical reasoning." She can't even do that while she's on the phone with Jamie, and just ignore this person. And also, what about when the gentleman says, "Hey, are you Sarah Atwood?" And she's like, "Yeah, how would you know that?" The moment she hears those words, I would have hit my gas pedal so damn fast and spread away and then ducked off to the side because, oh my God, someone might be trying to kill me. So she's quite stupid at that point and dies in the process, getting shot in the head and the chest while Jamie's on the phone with her and is now freaking out. Oh boy, Jamie. Obviously, those people are from the people that were working with her previously, Sarah Atwood, that is. And Jamie has to call 911. And man, what a way to end the episode. Best of the three so far, I'd have to say. I'm sure a lot of you might agree. And really, this death, Sarah Atwood's death, means a lot to Jamie, because now it's made Jamie even more vulnerable because of what happens in the room with all the political figures as the 27th governor, Steve, states that the lease is reinstated, and says something shocking to the attorney general, that he is now going to recuse himself from the matter of condemnation as well as any investigation for the death of Governor John Dutton, for obvious reasons. So now he's caught in the middle of an open homicide investigation for John Dutton, his father's death, and now Sarah Atwood's murder. I'm not sure how Jamie's going to respond to this. Beth is going to start putting two and two together and is really going to accentuate the tension between both her and Jamie, and I'm sure Kayce as well, because my thought is that Kayce is going to get the toxicology report back. We're going to see whatever the chemical is that they injected into John Dutton's foot, put the murder of Sarah Atwood together with market equities. Maybe something will come back from Kayce's SEAL buddy, and at that point, he's going to use his skills to go after Jamie again, and Jamie's going to be probably shook because now he has both Beth and Kayce coming after him, and he's completely defenseless, and I don't know what he's going to try to do in terms of being the attorney general, and I think he's just going to outright crumble and fall. Overall, I'd say this episode was quite gripping and much better than the previous two episodes. It had emotional depth and, advancing the central murder of John Dutton along the way. It really highlights the unraveling between Kayce and Beth to Jamie. The fragility of the alliance is now in place because now that Sarah Atwood's gone, Jamie has no one to really, cover for him, and Jamie really has no one to look out for himself. And I don't think Senator Perry is going to offer him any help either. I think this episode sets the stage effectively for both the penultimate episode coming next week, followed by the series finale. I think we're going to have a very dramatic climax as we see the repercussions for Jamie and what Kayce is going to end up doing for his life, and the effect it's going to have on him and his family. And then what's left for Beth and Rip and the ranch itself, followed by, a underutilized subplot for Chief Rainwater and what he'll have to say, or maybe what his involvement will be in the final two episodes with the land of the Dutton Ranch. What did you guys think about this episode? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Are you looking forward to the final two episodes? If so, leave a comment in the comment section below. If there's something I missed or you wanted to hear me talk about, drop it in the comments and I'll respond that way. If you enjoyed this video and want to help support the channel, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe for more future content, and I'll catch you on the next one here on The Plot Strikes Back. Cheers.